All right, folks, it's the 26th of December, 2024. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This is In the Image Clothing Company Music. We here are going to talk about the problem with the G string on guitars. Here's the thing. The G string on a guitar, I'm just going to get right into this. That's as much intro as I'm going to give. We've got the E, the A, the D, and then there's that G. Okay, that's the string, the G, this one right here. Okay, that first nylon string. These low ones are wound, and then there's the first nylon string. So what we have is a thick string. This, okay, let me clarify. This only applies to nylon string guitars. Okay, yes. Steel string guitars are different because the G is not excessively thick the way that it is on nylon string guitars. So that G string is so much thicker than this one here, which is the D, which is next to the G, and then this one here, which is the B, which is on the other side of the G. Okay, so the D and the B are both quite a bit thinner than that G. And it's in between those two. So what happens so often, this part up here, this white part on a guitar is called the nut. And there's little slots where each of the 6 strings go through that nut. And these things are mass produced, and they just make them kind of a uniform size and shape and send them out and place them onto guitars. Now, what happens so often is if you feel across that nut, once you get to that G, you'll feel it like come up, and then it goes back down for the B and the E. And that G will be sticking up so much higher a lot of the times than the rest of the strings on the guitar. And you don't want that. You do not want that. Because what's happening is when you're fretting a note, like a D chord right here, my pointer finger is on that G string. And if it's higher, it's going to be like this. Look at my shoulder. A pointer finger will be off the fretboard. So when you're just kind of fretting through things, like I'm playing an A minor, and my ring finger's on that G, okay? So now my ring finger in that case would be higher than all my other fingers. Look at the shoulder, right? And then you go from that A minor to that D. Now it goes from that ring finger being on the G to that pointer finger. And so now you're just playing guitar and you're like adjusting your fingers at weirdly different heights, and it's changing your shoulder. It's putting tension into your hand, traveling through your forearm, through your whole body. And your playing won't be able to be as smooth because you're having to compensate when only the finger that's on that string is higher. And so it's really weird. That we do not want. Never do you want that. What you need to have happen is that slot of the nut where the G is needs to be a little bit deeper than the other 2 slots next to it. And then ideally just having that nice rounding to it, right? I'm always discussing we need a radius, a rounding to the saddle, which is this white part down here, rounding there, rounding across the frets, and a rounding across the nut slots with the depth of them to accommodate for that round hand that we have, okay? Now, yes, this is a flat fretboard guitar originally, but I have radiused it myself with a file. So this guy's Frank. His name is Frank, short for Frankenstein, because of, well, that's one of the reasons. And there's other things to him that are quite unique. But this is my Yamaha CGS 102A, a little half-sized. I love this guitar. Now, yeah, you'll need to get that slot lower than the strings next to it, because then it's actually going to be the same height on the top, because the thickness of that G is actually just thicker. So that's one big thing with the G string on nylon string classical guitars. Now, on this end, you got the same thing going on, because the strings are the same thickness at both ends, but now you've got them coming across something that's just going to be slightly round like this. And so the string is still taller. And when you're strumming across that, you want it to be able to be, and you can see on Frank, he's beautifully set up now. This will be cool too, just as a documentation of how he is right now. See all the way up and down that fretboard from the saddle all the way up to the nut. Pretty darn evenly height across, and then that even slight rounding to everything. That's the ideal. That's how we would need to set up our guitars. Now, what's going on with the Frank's saddle down here is he actually has what's called a compensated saddle. Let's see if we can get this to be able to be seen with this lighting and this camera. If not, that's okay, but if you can tell, yeah, I think you can tell right there. See how like from right here to right here within the saddle, this white piece, there's like a little bit of a groove where that G is going across, and it makes that G sit just slightly lower because it's thicker. So then when you look across it this way, ideally, like I'm saying, they're all just even, but with that slight rounding to them. Oh, I was pressing the strings down a little bit. I won't press them just so you can see how they naturally will be sitting. We want it to be just like that across. This guy's set up really, really well. It took quite a bit for me to get him to this point, but it's really, really worth it. So that's big. You can do that yourself. You can just kind of put a little bit of a groove into that saddle so it's just slightly lower where that G is going to cross, and so then it's even with the rest of them. Just don't go too far, because you definitely don't want it farther down either than the strings next to it. And then when the string gets wrapped here, right, to hold it onto the tie block, this is called the bridge, this wooden piece, and this piece is called the tie block. It's just, yeah, where you tie the strings around. When the string loops around itself right here, you want to make sure that that gets like pinched pretty well, right? So this side comes close to this side, like you pinch that loop, because if that loop's not pinched, then it's like making it so the string comes up and over at like a less sharp angle. And when it's kind of like a looser angle coming up over the saddle, right? See how the strings come up and then they go over the saddle? It's called a break angle. When that's not a really nice and sharp angle, then it's going to kind of put that string higher, right? It's going to arc it over, and then on this side of the saddle, it's going to actually sit higher. So you want to pinch that loop tight. And ideally with each of them, I am going to do a stringing tutorial. I don't have one yet done, because since I've been making these videos for In the Image Clothing Company Music, I haven't put a new set of strings on. But I actually have some being shipped here, and when they get here, I will do a stringing tutorial, and then I'll show that about pinching those strings down there. So those are some things with the G. Another thing up at the headstock is your G string and your D string are the ones that are right next to the wood in the center of the headstock, right? This is the D coming next to the wood here, and this is the G coming next to the wood here. Now, you don't want the strings to be against anything at all at either ends, right? I show, like within my set, I have a video titled Full Nylon String Guitar Setup. And like I show, you know, with where the excess string is wrapped, you don't want the string that's actually coming up to be sitting against that, because that can lose some of your sustain, meaning how long the note will ring out for. And that's why we only loop them once down here as well, because excess wrapping can do the same thing. So we don't want our strings against anything besides the nut and the saddle, and then they just have to be, you know, hooked on at the ends so that they can have tension. But the G, it's so common for people's G string to be right next to this wood or even touching it. And you don't want it close. I mean, you don't want it like really close. It's going to be kind of close just because that's just the location of where it's going to be coming up to. And then, you know, coming down to the slot, it's just going to be, you know, kind of close, but you don't want it right next to that wood. And then definitely do not let it touch that wood. Otherwise, what'll happen is that sound, like that's a G, even if it's slightly out of tune. Frank might be slightly out of tune, but that's a G. the sustain of that G won't be there even if it's just near this wood, because it'll be vibrating and just kind of lose some of the sustain against that. So those are really the biggest things with that G. Like I was kind of mentioning about steel string guitars, it's pretty much something you don't have to worry about with steel string guitars at all. But I don't play steel string guitars, so this is Frank that I'm showing this with. So yeah, there you go. That's what we need to be able to make sure we have happen with our G string on a nylon string guitar. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to play. Like I said, your left hand fretting, it's going to have a lot of discrepancy. Your right hand picking is going to have a lot of discrepancy. Same thing about like having an elevation where you're fretting on that G. You're going to have a finger that's higher when you're picking. It's usually that pointer finger, right on that G, because normally you'll have ring, middle, and pointer. That's like the most common fingers that you'd have in those locations. So that pointer finger is going to be on that G a lot of the time. And now instead of this nice rounding, you're kind of having this happen if that G is elevated. And look what it does to the shoulder. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, that compensated little G slot in the saddle is really great to have. That's something you can definitely do yourself, just kind of put a little groove into it. But yeah, strumming as well, because what'll happen is you want to just be able to evenly get across the strings, slight rounding so that when you approach it, it's like you can easily hit all the strings on both sides, right? If it's flat, it's just, we never want a flat saddle in a guitar, never, meaning the human body does not. So, yeah. If the G is sticking up and you're strumming, you can strum like pretty well smoothly through the 3 bass strings, then you'll hit that G and it's elevated, and then you'll kind of almost miss the B that's next to it, and then maybe hit the E a little bit, and so you won't get an even, like, I'm just gonna strum open strings, it's slightly out of tune. You won't get an even amount of strumming on each string if any one of them is higher or lower, rather than just being evenly, slightly radiused across, right? So yeah, very, very important. Something that definitely does set nylon string guitars apart from steel strings in this way specifically. You need to do all that you can to allow that G to be the same height as everything else. So anyway, yeah, there we go. That's what I'm gonna say for that G string within this video. And yeah, cool stuff, man. Really cool stuff. That's something, it'll shave off just so much frustration. That's what I'm going to put on that, is the frustration that it's not going to be there as long as you allow it to be even. Otherwise, it's just going to cause a lot of discomfort and pain within your whole body, because it doesn't just stop at your hands. It travels through your forearms, it alters your shoulders, then your breathing gets altered, your hips, rotations change, your feet change, it goes through your entire body, because one string is like maybe not even a full millimeter higher than the others, or maybe somewhere around that height, so very, very, very important. Be meticulous. Be very, very particular, very, very meticulous about how you set up your guitars. That's the only way you're going to actually be able to play them. Or otherwise, you're just fighting it. So I have that video that I referenced where I just discuss exactly how to do everything you need to do to allow the guitar to work for your body. It's the only thing that we can do within our lives, is have everything that we do work around us. We cannot work around the things that we're trying to do. The body only does what it does. This is In The Image Clothing Company Music, after all, a branch, a third of our full company, In The Image Clothing Company. We also have In The Image Clothing Company podcast, and we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, if you'd like to check that out. So there you go. Do all that you can to do those things that I mentioned within here to that G string of your nylon string guitar, and have fun, and stick around here if you'd like to. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff that I know that, not out of any kind of ego, but that most all other people don't know, just because I get very, very particular. And and I've had a ton of experience tearing guitars apart, working on them, and so there is a lot of stuff that I know that most people wouldn't be able to tell you. And I'm just saying that for the sake of, if you want the information, that's what I'm doing, is that's why I'm making these videos. So, okay, thank you. Like I said, today's the 26th of December, 2024. My name is Evan Strong, and yeah, I'm also a guitarist. I'm not just going to sit here and teach you how to do things to the guitar, but I'm also going to play and have good, fun, cool music that you can, check out if you'd like. So yeah, shout out to Frank the guitar. Okay, thank you.